Hi, Year 2. Now, I'm glad you could join me today because I've got something quite unbelievable to tell you. Last week, myself and Miss Daria and Mrs. Wilkinson went on an extraordinary adventure. And I was sure that you guys weren't going to believe me, so I took some photos just to prove it. And I've turned these photos into a book, and I'm going to share this book with you today. Now I'm going to call it The Incredible, Unbelievable Adventures of the Travelling Teachers. Are you sitting comfortably? If you're not, get yourself comfortable now. And let's begin. Last week, Miss Daria, Miss Wilkinson, and Miss Stevens were enjoying their usual after school daily mile when a strange machine landed in the middle of the playground. The teachers gasped, "What is this strange object?" Looking closely, they could just make out the words "Time Machine" written on the front. "Shall we go and have a look inside?" said the mischievous Miss Daria. Everyone agreed and snuck inside the time machine. Inside the time machine there were blinking, flashing buttons everywhere. "I wonder what this button does," said the inquisitive Miss Stevens. And before the other teachers could stop her, she had pushed a big red button. The time machine began to shake and wobble. "I think we're travelling through time and space," shouted Miss Wilkinson. "I wonder where we'll end up," wailed a nervous Miss Daria. After a while, the time machine began to stop shaking. It had landed. Bravely, the three teachers opened the door and crept out of the machine. They could see large creatures and lots of green grass. Can you guess where they were? "I think we're in the prehistoric era," exclaimed Mrs. Wilkinson. Just then, two enormous Tyrannosaurus rexes burst through the trees. "Quick!" shouted Miss Stevens. "Get back to the time machine!" Luckily, the teachers made it safely back. "Well, that was exciting," said Miss Daria. "Shall we see where the time machine will take us next?" said Miss Stevens. Once again, she pressed the big red button. The time machine began to shake and wobble. "Here we go again," said Mrs. Wilkinson. "I wonder where we'll end up," wailed a nervous Miss Daria. After a while, the time machine began to stop shaking. It had landed. Bravely, the three teachers opened the door and crept out of the machine. The teachers could see soldiers wearing strange uniforms. They were in the middle of a big battle. "I know where we are," shouted a wise Mrs. Wilkinson. "Those are Roman soldiers. We must be in the middle of a Roman war." The teachers made a quick dash back to the time machine. "Wow! I've always wanted to meet a Roman soldier," said Mrs. Wilkinson. "Can we go somewhere safer next time, please?" said Miss Daria. "Let's try," said Miss Stevens. Once again, she pressed the big red button. After a while, the time machine began to stop shaking. It had landed. Bravely, the three teachers opened the door and crept out of the machine. They could smell the sea air. The teachers had a good look around. It looked very familiar. There was something very strange about this place. They could see people on the beach wearing long skirts and suits. They could see horses pulling bathing machines into the water. "I read about this era," said Miss Stevens. "We're on a Victorian beach holiday." The teachers enjoyed an ice cream and a paddle before heading back to the time machine. "Let's go on one more adventure," said an excited Miss Daria. Miss Stevens, for the last time, pressed the big red button, and the time machine began to move. Finally, it stopped, and the teachers cautiously crept out. "This looks very familiar," said Mrs. Wilkinson. "If I am not wrong, that river is the Thames. And look, there's St. Paul's Cathedral." "We're in London," said a very confused Miss Daria. It did not look like London at all. The houses were wooden and the streets were narrow. Phew, it smells really bad here, said Miss Stevens. Suddenly the teachers noticed a fire in one of the buildings. Within minutes the fire had spread. I wonder why it's spreading so quickly, said a worried Miss Stevens. It might be because of the wooden house, said a wise Miss Wilkinson. Pretty soon most of London was on fire. The teachers ran for their lives. I wonder what year London burnt down because of a terrible fire, panted and exhausted Miss Dowrier. As they almost reached the safety of the time machine, they were stopped by a man wearing a very long curly wig. You there, said the man. I need you to help me bury my Parmesan cheese and wine. I can't have them being burned by the fire. The teachers were kind ladies, so they quickly helped the man. Thank you, ladies, said the man. My name is Samuel Pepys, and I want to give you something for helping me. Samuel Pepys handed the teachers a very special book, a diary. We promise to look after it for you, Mr. Pepys, said Mrs. Wilkinson. The teachers took the diary and went back to the time machine. This diary seems very important, said Miss Dowrier. I wonder if it will tell us more about the time that London burnt down, said Miss Stevens. Let's take it back with us and share it with the Year 2s at Chalkwell, suggested Mrs. Wilkinson. All the teachers agreed this was a brilliant idea and headed back to the year 2021 with the precious diary. Amazing, right? Some might even say it's quite unbelievable. But it must have happened because I've got the proof. I've got here Samuel Pepys's diary, which he gave to us on that journey, on that adventure. And Mrs. Bard has very kindly taken some photos of it for you, so you can have a little read of it at home, and it's saved in your History Lesson 1 lesson. So have a little read of it and find out a bit more about that huge fire that took place in London a long time ago. And we also thought we might now change our topic. So we are no longer going to be having the topic of heroes. Instead, we're going to change it to time travellers. And we're going to learn a lot more about that huge fire that took place in London a long time ago. So we have also set you now a to-do on Purple Mash. So we would like you, please, to design your very own time machine. Now, you can draw the inside of it or the outside of it. It's up to you. Draw us a picture of it, what it would look like. And then underneath, you can write us some sentences about it. So you could write a sentence about describing the time machine, or you could write some sentences about maybe where you'd like to go if you were a time traveller, or you might write some sentences about an adventure of a time traveller. It's entirely up to you, but please complete that one and we can have a look at it and give you some feedback marking on that one. If you would like something else to do based on this video, you might choose to do some junk modelling. So you might find some recycled material around your house and build a time machine for yourself out of cardboard boxes and things like that. Or you might choose to do some research of one of the eras that myself and Miss Dowrier and Mrs. Wilkinson visited. So you might do some research about the Victorians or the Romans or the dinosaurs. It's entirely up to you. I hope you enjoyed this story and our adventure, and we will speak to you very soon.